Alright, so what I'm going to do is make seed balls. Seed balls are just clay balls, and I bought some uh, red clay. This is the finest I could get. You can see it's not very fine, so I'm going to mash this up into just fine powder. For seeds, you need to have about 6 to 7 times the amount of clay for the amount of seed you have. In my case, since I have about these many seeds, I will need about 6 to 7 times of this, which is still almost a pailful. So that's what I'll do first. Some of it at least, will go inside the pail. These are all the seeds we have in here. They're going to be mixed up into the clay. And what I'm going to do is add some water. And really make it into a paste. So I've been making these seed balls. Seed balls for Nendo Dango. It's an idea that came from Fukuoka, Masanobu. Masanobu Fukuoka, as he is more popularly known. He wrote a book called The One Straw Revolution. That was in the 70s. And he was one of those pioneers who saw that humans were using too many chemicals and pesticides in our food for our own good. It was also bad for the environment, and he found that after many years of trying, his rice, which grew without fertilizer, and also without chemical pesticides, were actually growing much more rice, had more seeds per head than all the rice that was being planted by his neighbors who were using pesticides and chemicals. So he taught people natural farming. Natural farming, he says, should be a form of farming where you don't use any fertilizers except chicken poop, maybe cow manure. Well, natural fertilizer is fine, but not artificial one. Not artificial fertilizers. The second thing is you don't use any pesticides. Very important, no chemical pesticides. And thirdly, he says no plowing, which is why I use cardboard for the main garden. That's Charles Dowding's method, using cardboard to peel off the weeds instead of plowing. But Fukuoka Masanobu, he had a bit more radical of a plan. He said, don't do anything, just make seed balls and throw these balls with as many seeds as you can in them into the fields, and you'll see what grows after that. So obviously he didn't mow his grasses down and all that, but I wanted to give these plants here, the seeds, them rolling, a bit of a chance to have some sunlight. So I have mowed down the grass. And what this has are different seeds. I think a good 20 varieties maybe. Well, Fukuoka said have 100, but I only have 20 or so. And these all seed at different times. They germinate at different times of the year. Some in February, which is very soon. Some in May, very late. Mostly all in March and April. So they germinate when the weather is slightly warm. But this means, making them to clay balls like this, means that they are protected from the elements. And they don't dry out they don't get eaten by birds easily. Plus, when it rains, these clay balls, they will weaken. and essentially break forth, and all the seeds that have been in them will come out onto the ground, and if they think it's right for them, they'll start germinating at that spot. And having plants grown from seeds actually it just gives you stronger plants because the roots are there, and the plants wants to be there, which is why it grew. So that's what I'm doing. And the other thing I wanted to say is, how did I come across this idea? So, in university I was doing political science, and one of those books that I read was Seeing Like a State. So how different things that states have done have failed the world. For example, making huge cities with utopian cities with let's say huge grids and big buildings everywhere. Well, Seeing Like a State, that book, one chapter has in it farming, and basically it said if you plant, traditionally people have planted many different kinds of plants side by side, and their yields have been fine. It's just that with industrial farming, where we only want one crop, we have to use herbicides to kill off all the other plants that we don't want, and that essentially allows you to have a field that's very uniform. So your machines can, let's say if we want to have tea, you can use a tea harvester to get just tea. Imagine if you have different kinds of varieties of like different things in your fields. Your tea harvester will not only get tea, but let's say burdock and sunflower, stuff like that, caught inside the harvesting machine. So you don't want that. You essentially want just tea, and you have to weed all the time because that's all you want. So Seeing Like a State helped me see that it doesn't have to be that way. If we all had small farms, just in our backyard and stuff like that, if all of us were planting many kinds of plants and harvesting them for our own consumption, then there wouldn't have to be fertilizers in the fields, and in our own fields in fact. So to cut the long story short, basically what I'm doing is making all these balls in the hopes that different kinds of flowers will bloom for the bees. I want to have bees here in the future, but at the same time I have burdock and Welsh onions, the stuff that the deers and monkeys don't normally eat, so that you can see what grows here. And the cafe here, at first it'll be for friends, will be using ingredients sourced from nearby. But all that we need to start voting with is a seed ball of clay, water, and seeds. This will take some time. Alright, ta-da! All the seed balls are done. Now a question that you might have is, I have all these seeds from different plants, and they all germinate at different times. Let's say for example these flowers, the Omphalodis linifolia, they are supposed to be planted in the end of the start of March, and they'll start blooming around June. Whereas these okra, actually the same thing, March and June. Let's pick something different. For example, like these, the daikon. Daikon in this colder region is supposed to be planted in April. They'll start coming out by September. So different plant. One last one would be this. This is a good example. Sunflower seeds. They can come out around, they can be germinated around April. They come out around July, or They will be planted around let me see, July, and they'll come out in October. So these ones, Lintus annuus, yeah, sunflower. These don't seem to be compatible with all these other plants. So why am I putting them all together right now in January? The thing is, these seeds are now resting inside the bunch of seeds I've put all together. And nature will decide what will grow, what should grow at what time. So when it rains, these balls will break down. When they break down, the seeds will start coming out, depending on when they're supposed to come out. The whole idea is that this protects them from being eaten by birds before they can germinate. It's just to give them a bit of a chance at surviving. So can't move because they're all quite wet still. So anyway, they'll dry off, and then we'll have seed balls to throw in the next episode.